Hey Amarillo, I'm Jason Boyett, and you're listening to Hey Amarillo, the interview podcast featuring some of the most interesting people and stories of Amarillo, Texas. As part of this podcast partnership with Brick & Elm Magazine, I want to give a podcast shout out to the Texas Outdoor Musical and to Ascension Academy. The July-August issue of Brick & Elm is available now. It's in print. You can find it at United Supermarkets locations, Market 33, Burrowing Owl Books, and other locations across town. You can also find it online at brickandelm.com. The cover story is our tour of Amarillo ice cream and frozen treat places. It's so much fun. Today's guest is Dr. Jeff Whelchel. And Jeff is interesting to me for a couple of reasons. First, he's a former family physician who was in private practice in Amarillo starting in 1997. Now, he's no longer in that kind of practice, and we talk about why. But it starts with a major health issue he experienced in 2005, and that transformed how he viewed health and how he treated patients. And second, Jeff is no longer in private practice, at least as a family physician at all. In fact, in 2021, he started an entirely new career as a financial advisor. Now, that's a career change that takes people off guard, and so we talk about it. And to give you an idea of how interesting this conversation was, I really wanted to ask Jeff about his side gig, singing bass in a local gospel quartet, and we didn't even get around to that. So we cover a lot of interesting territory. Here's Jeff Whelchel. Jeff Whelchel, welcome to the Hey Amarillo podcast. Thanks for being here.
Well, I'm glad to be here. I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm honored to have you. I should say that we've known each other for a few years because my wife works at your office. But I want to start with you the same way that I start with all my guests, and that's just to ask you why you're in Amarillo in the first place. So what brought you here?
Well, I was raised in the big city of Claude, Texas, about 30 miles southeast of here. My dad was a coach and a school administrator and a weekend farmer. So He would say he coached and was a principal so he could afford to farm, and then he would say he farmed so he could afford to coach and be a principal.
Right.
So
both of those needed a side gig, right?
Absolutely.
Did you go to high school in Claude, all the way through?
He was a middle school principal at Highland Park before it had a high school.
Okay.
And so my 7th, 8th, and 9th grade years, I went to Highland Park with him, and then I went back for my last 3 years of high school back to Claude.
Okay. And then once you graduated, did you know what you wanted to do? Did you have a plan at that point?
You know, I thought I wanted to be a doctor since I could talk pretty much. We have photos of me doctoring everybody in the family, and that was, my mother said, I don't care what you do, just don't be a farmer or a coach. And so I knew those were off the table. Yeah. But other than that, and I'd always had an interest. I've always felt like we need to do something that makes an impact for other people. And so it was just natural to gravitate towards medicine.
Where did you go for your education then?
I went to Plainview, Texas, to Wayland Baptist University, where I met my wife, Pam, and this summer we're celebrating 35 years of marriage.
All right, congratulations.
And thank you. And then after I graduated from Wayland, I went to Texas A&M School of Medicine, and at that time it was the first 2 years in College Station, and then we moved to Temple.
All right.
And did our 3rd and 4th year out of Scott and White Hospital. It's now Baylor Scott and White. And then I did my residency at the Waco Family Practice Program in Waco, Texas.
Did you know from the beginning that you wanted to get into family practice, or did you have any sort of specialty in mind?
I had an interest in dermatology, but I also had an interest in returning to the Panhandle. And at that time, in my small town thinking, and my wife is from Groover, and so at that time we thought we wanted to live in a smaller community. And, there's not many dermatologists in Groover or Claude.
What I've heard, there's not many in Amarillo.
No,
there's
not.
A dearth of them here. So
exactly. And so at that time, that was kind of my dream, but I thought, family practice would fit with any small community. And so plus, as I went through my training, I liked every field of medicine, but there wasn't that one that just knocked me over.
Okay.
That I thought, that's what I want to do. And so I became a jack of all trade, master of none, as they say.
Was it always a goal to get back to the Texas Panhandle?
Yes.
You never thought I'll go someplace else?
Well, my father died in 1990, so right in the middle of medical school, and so I wanted to be back closer to my mom, who was living in Claude at the time, and my wife wanted to be closer to her parents who were still up in the Groover area.
Okay.
So yeah, it was our goal from the beginning that we expected to be back in the Panhandle.
Okay. And moving into a family practice is not necessarily a risk. There's a whole lot of people that do that in Amarillo.
Yes.
There's a lot of competition. But there's a lot of families in Amarillo, and there's a lot of people that need those services.
And so more, it was more and more even. And so, at that time, I visited multiple small communities around. I visited and interviewed at Dumas and Borger and Pampa and some various ones. And there just wasn't a group or a setting that, honestly, it looked like on some of those places, their docs get just slaughtered because there's more people than they can take care of.
Okay.
And so the recruiter that I was speaking to said, you need to come talk to these people. And I met with Amarillo Family Physicians Clinic. And that seemed to be, from a lifestyle perspective, much more humane to have 11 partners. So I was not on call every night. I was only on call, 1 weekend a month and 2 or 3 times during the week. And so that's why we ultimately decided to join that group.
Okay. What year did you join that group?
1997.
Okay. How long did you work within that environment?
I was there until November of 2018.
Okay.
And so for 21 and a half years.
Tell me what it was like. I think a lot of people, their only knowledge of family practice is their own doctor that they see. And we're only seeing them for, 30 minutes every few months. Absolutely. So tell me what it's like to be doing that full time.
Some personalities handle it better than others, and I enjoy people. I'm a people person, but I felt an immense responsibility of taking care of so many people. And at one point, I had over 6,000 patients. And so if you can imagine it, I normally tried to see, 28 to 30 people a day, somewhere in that time frame. Or that amount. And
that's over what, like a 8-hour work day?
Yes,
10 hours?
Typically, it changed as we went along. When I first started, we took care of our hospital patients. We did our admissions from the ER. And so it was not uncommon to have 12 to 14-hour days then, because I would have to go admit patients, see them in the hospital before my clinic started at 8 a.m. Mm-hmm. And then oftentimes I'd have to run and admit somebody over lunch or do notes. And then oftentimes when the clinic was over at around 5, I had to go back to the hospital to check on those patients or admit another one. And then if I was on call, then you would be on call throughout the night. So it was just high volume. And I think we did a good job. I think I did a good job taking care of people. And so it's what I would say is a classic high volume conventional medicine practice. And they're still there working hard, doing a good job. And so I have no ill will with those guys.
But part of the reason you came here was a lifestyle decision.
Absolutely.
And 12 to 14-hour days like that doesn't sound like a great lifestyle.
Well, it was tough, but it did get better. About probably 10 or 15 years ago, the concept of a hospitalist came into being. Mm-hmm. And so we had some older partners at that time that were very enthused by that thought of not having to go to the hospital. And so we made that change, and that took a lot of load off. And so then...
So this, instead of you going to check on certain patients at the hospital, there's someone who's
they take
representing
care of them when they're in
the
hospital. Now, if it was a patient that I was really close to, I might go see them, but I wasn't responsible for their care.
Okay.
And so that made it better. So no more early morning admissions after that point, and then no in the evening going to see them. Now, we still managed an evening urgent care clinic. In fact, I think that's the only clinic in town that is run by doctors. And so,
which one was that?
At Amarillo Family Physicians.
Okay.
And so from 5 till about 8, it was not uncommon for us to see 30 people in a very fast-paced situation. And so, but that was only about 3 times a month at most. So, so that was good. But what made me end up leaving there is I had a personal health issue. I developed a Giardia parasitic infection, and that was probably 15 years ago now. And it required numerous rounds of antibiotics and a lot of treatments. And I was constantly nauseated, constantly cramping and having to run to the bathroom. And I saw a couple of GI guys in town. They worked me up. And so my diagnoses varied from you have microscopic colitis to you may have Crohn's disease to irritable bowel syndrome. And to be blunt, it destroyed my life. It was, during flares, I would go to the bathroom 30 times a day.
Do you know where you got it?
And have no idea. And normally that's not something you get from another person. That's usually from contaminated water.
Yeah, it's usually something you get on a backpacking trip.
Correct.
Or
Yeah,
out in the jungle
drink from a stream up in the mountains or
Yeah.
something. So I don't know, but it wouldn't go away. And then, well, at the time I was like, what's going on? And so I had a nurse that finally said, you need to go see this integrative or functional medicine doctor in another town. And honestly, I had no idea what to expect because I had always thought of those folks as being way out there. And so I went into the office, and very nice guy, went to the same residency that I did. And he said, look, your whole gut bacterial flora is destroyed because of your poor diet and your stress. And so he put me on some supplements and changed my diet and lifestyle, and I lost 30 pounds, and about 90% of the symptoms went away. And so that made me go, that is interesting. That's different than anything that I've ever been taught. What else is different? What am I treating that I think could be treated differently and maybe better? Because I do believe the body wants to heal itself if it can. And so that started me on this journey of more of the integrative or a functional medicine approach. And so I started going to every conference I could. I started hounding that poor doctor that I saw in Lubbock, asking him a million questions a day. And I basically relearned medicine.
How would you describe functional medicine to someone who only knows, going to see my doctor when I have a cold?
Well, okay. Regular conventional medicine is more based off of symptoms and diseases. We name something and then we have treatments that we use to treat it. Functional or integrative medicine is more trying to get to the root issue of what is going on. It doesn't really matter, did I have irritable bowel syndrome or Crohn's or whatever it was, what was causing my gut to be dysfunctional.
Right.
In that case, it was the fact that the bad bacteria were overwhelming it, the good bacteria were bad, and I needed to make some lifestyle changes. And so I would describe functional integrative medicine as getting to the root issue and trying to help the body heal itself without having to just treat symptoms. We end up treating patients with multiple different medicines. Oh, your blood pressure's high, we need to treat this. Oh, your blood sugar's high, we need to treat this. And we tend to not delve into the lifestyle, stress, sleep, diet, some of the things. And it's purely not because they don't agree with that, is they don't have time.
Yeah.
It
becomes transactional. You come in.
Exactly. You get paid for how many patients you see. And if you reduce that down, then realistically you're seeing a patient an hour. And in an insurance-based model plan, the way things are now, that's not profitable. You can't pay your bills with that. So
your focus as a physician started to shift because of your personal story.
Because of my personal health journey.
But then how did that affect then your career?
It sapped the joy that I got out of the job. If I would see somebody that was morbidly overweight and their blood sugar was sky high and they're diabetic, I would go, this is reversible if we make some radical dietary changes and so forth. But I didn't have the time really to go through that whole educational process.
And that may be a multi-year process too. That's not something you can just fix in a meeting at the doctor's office.
But it was purely a matter of time, whereas my previous training was, their blood sugar's high, we need to put them on metformin. Or we need to prescribe something like that. And so I felt like I was treating many of these patients in a way that was not the best way to treat them, if that makes sense. But I just didn't have the resources or the time to approach it the way I wanted to. And so when you're doing something that you feel like there's probably a better way to do it, it makes what you're doing not as enjoyable.
Right. And so you said that you continued in your practice until 2018. What happened after that point?
At that point, I left there and we started a clinic called, and I partnered with family medicine centers, and we opened the Center for Functional Medicine, which was behind the town club on Cornell. And we were open for about 2 years, and I really liked what we were doing. We were focused on corporate wellness. Businesses would send their employees to us, and we would try. Our whole point was try to identify some things and correct it before it became a big problem.
Which is good for businesses because that reduces their insurance
days. They don't have as many heart attacks or these big bill expenses that's put on their insurance, and it was working well. But then COVID hit, and those businesses weren't even allowing their employees to go to work, much less to the doctor. So we lost a lot of our funding. And then the doctor that I had partnered with elected to go back to his full-time primary care practice. And so then it was just up to me. And to be honest with you, we were in too much building with too many expenses. And so at that point, it was either open a new building, start from scratch, new staff, or do something else.
Right. And so I know that you went the do something else route.
Yes.
And as we've discussed before, like that's something that a lot of people doesn't make sense to them because we view physicians and doctors as these trusted figures. Sure. They're always revered. And then you went through all the education to get to that point. You built up your career, you built up your practice, and then you left it behind.
I did.
And made a career pivot. And so tell me about the thought process that went into that.
Well, I've always had an interest in financial things. I've taught Financial Peace University classes, which is a Dave Ramsey course, at my church for 20 plus years. And so I'd always had a natural interest. And Josh Wood is a good friend of mine. And Josh is very good about checking in with people that he hasn't talked to in a while. And so he asked me for lunch about, well, it was the summer of 2018, somewhere in that time frame.
You were in the middle then of that.
And I was going, I'm burned out of this place. I need to do something else. And I take that back. That was at 2020. That was towards the end of Center for Functional Medicine. So I'm incorrect on that. But still, I could tell this is not financially viable. It's just me. My expenses are more than I'm bringing in. Something's going to change here. And so he was just checking in on me to see how I was doing. And then I knew of a health issue that he was having with one of his kids. And so he said in passing that he really needs an associate because if his son gets sick again, he's going to have to go back to Fort Worth, and it's hard to maintain a business when you're 300 miles away. And so I just very snarkily said, well, I'll just come work with you. And he laughed and I laughed. And then we both started just kind of ruminating on it and chewing on it. And my last child had just left the home. And so the nest was empty. And I was like, if I'm going to make a change, it's now or never. And so I thought, why not? Well, one thing medicine teaches you is how to be good at taking tests. Yeah. So I started studying for all of the series exams so that you can get your brokerage license. And I passed all of those. And so I joined him in January of 2021. And I've been there 3.5 years now.
It is interesting because a lot of people think, well, I'm good at managing my own IRA or my 401k. I could be a financial advisor. I've taken Dave Ramsey classes and stuff like that. But there's a lot of tests that you have to do in order to become a certified financial planner or whatever you want to be.
It was about a 6 to 9 month process from start to finish, and that was pretty accelerated. Fortunately, I passed everything the first time. But if you don't pass it, then that can go on for years. But, it utilizes the same skill set that I used in medicine. You've got to be able to make people feel comfortable with you, to have rapport with them, for you to show your knowledge. And but the positive now, if I mess up, I cost them some money, but I don't kill them. So the stress is definitely better.
Okay.
My heart is still as a physician. Now I give 95% of my time to financial advising because it's honestly part of it was a challenge. This is something new and different than I've done my whole adult life. Now I still have a hormone clinic called Healthy Hormones that's inside the Precision Chiropractic office at I-40 and Bell. And I'm over there only 7 hours a week. Okay. But I mainly do testosterone management and thyroid management. We do hormone pellets, Bio-T pellets. And
that's falls in line with a lot of trends in healthcare is focusing more on hormonal imbalances as opposed to something else that might be happening.
Well, it's one of the frustrating things of conventional medicine to me was we do a lot of things to prevent bad things from occurring, but it doesn't necessarily make the patients feel better. Okay. If I put them on a blood pressure medicine, it may keep them from having a stroke, but they don't necessarily feel better. They oftentimes feel worse. Well, hormones are some of the low-hanging fruit that if you balance their hormones, you really make an impact on somebody. They have more energy, they sleep better, their libido's better, they're able to lose weight, they can gain muscle mass. It really reduces their chronological age substantially. And so that part of it's fun. And I didn't want to give up all of my skills that I had with medicine completely. And so that lets me still dabble in that and enjoy it without completely forsaking 20 years of education.
So you're spending about a fifth of your week doing that, the rest of it as a financial
advisor.
That's
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
2 years into that pivot, has it been something that you feel is personally beneficial? Like leaving behind a deep career in medicine and making that really hard switch for personal reasons, like has it brought you the fulfillment that you were after?
And depending on the day or the week, my answer might be different.
Okay.
But my stress...
Or the stock market, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 2022 was not a fun year to be a financial advisor. But my stress had reached the point when I was in medicine full time that I was sleeping poorly. I felt terrible all the time. I would wake up Saturday already anxious about Monday. And the real pivot for me was one day my wife said, you're not the guy I married. And I said, what do you mean by that? And she said, I used to be married to this happy-go-lucky, joking guy, and now I'm married to this anxious, brooding, nervous wreck of a guy. And she said, I think I'm going to be a young widow. And that hit me between the eyes. And I was like, what am I doing? And, I had great guilt. I really loved my patients, and I gave them everything that I had. And so I felt very bad about leaving that practice. But so it took me a while. And then when you go from feeling like you're very comfortable with something to doing something completely new that
as an adult, like
that you
in the
feel
middle
inadequate
of
with, there were days I'm going, what am I doing? I had that down so well. And there's a comfort with being comfortable, and very little things can surprise you to all of a sudden going in. And I didn't know the basics of how do I do this inside the computer system, and so that took some adjusting for that. And it was probably a good year to year and a half before I'm like, okay, I'm comfortable with most things that I'm dealing with now. Now, there's still an occasional bizarre financial situation that someone's in that I'll ask Josh, okay, bail me out. What do I do with this? But so it's better. It's not based off of sweat equity, like medicine is. Medicine's truly, you want to make a lot of money, then you just see a lot of patients. And so it's nice to not have that. I try to take really good care of my financial clients, but it's not like I have to see them X number of times in order to achieve that. I base that off of what that particular client wants.
Right.
Some people want to be talked to on a regular basis, and others don't even want to hear from me once a year. They're comfortable that someone's taking care of it and they don't have to worry about it.
Even so, though, it's a very similar kind of relationship that's based on you being an authority about something they may not feel like they know much about, and they want you to tell them what to do.
Absolutely. Well, and Josh, when he announced me to some of the first clients, he said, I was wanting a grandfatherly type as an associate. And I was like, wow, okay, that was a slam. But I understand what he was saying. You're going to tend to, if I was a 22-year-old guy right out of college, that doesn't breed as much natural confidence, I think, in somebody they know has been in the community for almost 30 years.
Okay. One of the things I wanted to ask, I know you've recently written a book that's about the thyroid, which is, of course, drawing on your medical history, but also has some of that functional medicine as the thought process driving it. So tell me a little bit about that book.
Well, interestingly, the weakest area of medicine that I felt coming out of my training was hormonal issues, which I'm a stubborn person, so that made my personal agenda is I want to figure this out and I want to feel more comfortable with it. And so as I started looking at some of these thyroid patients and some of the current treatments, I was like, we're way behind on the way we manage some things. And by the way, anything I say, I am not trying to speak negatively of any doctor or anything. I'm speaking more of current standards. Like the standard of care of treatment of hypothyroidism has not changed significantly in over 40 years. And despite lots of research that says differently. And so I noticed that as I'm studying this, and I'm like, I couldn't find a book that discussed what it was talking about. So I saw a need for it, just some sort of a handbook. So I wrote the new Thyroid Handbook, and its subtitle is A Guide for frustrated thyroid patients and medical professionals.
Okay.
And so it's trying to reach two audiences, which was kind of tricky.
And those are very different audiences.
Well, it is. And so I tried to lay it out in a simple way, but then I tried to back it with research. And so there's multiple pages of just study references in it for the medical people that need that as proof. But I try to make it readable for someone to where they go, that makes sense. That's what I need to do. So,
and a lot of what happens in medicine too is that patients learn to become their own advocates.
Right.
And so that's part of the reason you want somebody who's not a doctor reading this and saying,
Right.
oh, I see some of these symptoms.
Right.
It sometimes is up to them to ask their doctor, can we look in this direction?
Well, and that's a lot of functional and integrative patients that describes them. They've had an issue for a long time, and the conventional world has not really found a solution for them. So many of those people have gone on a personal journey going, I have got to figure out what's going on. Mm-hmm. And so if anybody reads my book that has never had a thyroid issue, I'm going to talk about some things that they're not going to have a clue what I'm discussing. But most thyroid patients know exactly what I'm talking about because they've been trying to find answers online or through support groups or various things. And so I just tried to put it in a concise form that they can have as a reference guide for their use.
Did you enjoy writing a book? I mean, for a lot of people who are not writers, like they feel like, man, I need to write this book, and they've got the drive to finish it, but it's a grueling process. Did it feel that way for you?
It's ended up, started fun, and then it got grueling because there's certain areas that just came off of my fingers quickly. Now I'm okay, I can write this, and we wrote those chapters. And then I'm like, okay, in order to complete this, I need to be discussing these areas, and they were not my strength, and so it was grueling for me to really dive into some of that. So anyone that's wanting to write a book, they just need to be prepared that it's a bigger deal than what you may think initially. But I wanted it as a legacy too. I have visions. My son is in medical school at Texas Tech here in Amarillo, and I love the thought that 30 years from now, he may be in his practice and he'll still have this old, by then probably obsolete thyroid management book that his dad wrote.
Yeah, so, hopefully it is obsolete because medicine has figured it out better, right?
They have woken up to some of the things I'm suggesting. Yeah, that's right.
Do you feel like the balance you have now between the medical and the financial careers is a good balance, where you're still doing a little bit of the medical stuff, you're still using that education? And
overall, it's okay. I could see at some point I'm going to have to make a choice because I also supervise IVRS clinic here in town, and they have a branch in Lubbock and they have a branch in Tennessee. So I have some work with that. And there are some days that I get a lot of financial work that comes in, and there's more than I can get done. And when I have days like that, I'm like, I don't know how long I'm going to be able to do this. But then other days, the financial world, it will be a lighter day, and then I'm able to kind of do more of that work. So far, I'm tiptoeing down that line, but I could see at some point that if one or other of them got excessively busy, I would have to make changes of some sort. But
both of those careers you've built here in Amarillo, is there something you've learned because you work so closely with people, whether they're people who are sick, people who need advice about their retirement or finances? Is Amarillo a good place to have pursued both of these lines of work that are very people-focused?
I think so. This part of the country is, the people are very friendly, and it's as much about the relationship as it is what you're offering them. And so I think, we're not a healthy part of the world.
Yeah.
I grew up in a home that almost every meal was fried, and there was some sort of bread with each meal. And so I've had to retrain myself how to eat. And so unfortunately, there's plenty of medical issues, cardiovascular issues here in town. When we were at Center for Functional Medicine, just on our corporate wellness, 2/3 to 3/4 of the people we tested were either pre-diabetic or diabetic.
Wow.
And so there's a huge need for medicine, and that's only going to become more so as we're aging as a society. And then on the financial world, I don't have a lot of high net worth people. I don't feel like I offer them much. But the average people that are working, 8 to 5, if I can show them direction on some of their finances, that's very rewarding to me. I'll give you a quick example. I had a family, they're out of Lubbock, that their son was killed in a workplace accident several years ago. And as part of the settlement, they received a large sum of money. Well, they'd never had any money in their life. They were living on probably $30,000 or $40,000 a year. And so I helped them completely get out of debt. They had never owned their own home, so they were able to pay cash for a house. And then we were able to use the remainder of that money to invest it in retirement plans, because neither one of them had a retirement account, and they're in their 50s. And so I feel like I was able to truly change their destiny of their lives. And that part, that is very rewarding to me. Just like in medicine, if I'm able to detect some condition and catch it before it becomes a big problem, that's very rewarding. But I think they're very similar in that regard.
And it's not something that just impacts that one person, but those are generational changes.
Absolutely.
And you're reaching into the future and helping people that come after them.
Yeah, if you can teach somebody how to better manage their money or live within their means, then they're going to teach that to their children. And that's how we don't advertise at my office. And so all of my clients either come from referrals that called in to see Josh, or that I've seen some of their friends or relatives, and they've sent their same way with my hormone clinic. I don't advertise for that. It's just people that they talk to somebody at work that all of a sudden feels better, and they're like, "What did you do?" Well, I saw Dr. Whelchel, and so then I get their referral.
This episode of Hey Amarillo is supported by Dr. Eddie Sauer, who practices general dentistry at Shemen Dental Group. Eddie has been my dentist since I was in college. He takes care of my family's teeth, my kids' teeth. He's a national speaker on Invisalign and uses that technology to improve his patients' smiles and positioning. We've used it in our family with great results. It's so much easier than the metal braces I had when I was a kid. You can learn more by following Shemen Dental on Facebook or visit shemendental.com. That's SHEMEN. This episode of Hey Amarillo is also supported by the Shops at Wolflin Square, which is celebrating 60 years and 4 generations of local ownership and management. Wolflin Square itself is a shopping center where most of the tenants are local. In fact, you've heard several of those entrepreneurs interviewed on the Hey Amarillo podcast. These shops attract thousands of patrons every day, and the management works hard to make sure every tenant succeeds. They do that by offering free social media marketing for all tenants, with a regular schedule of community events throughout the year, including Summer Sizzle, Holiday Open House, and a lot more. Learn more by visiting wolflinsquare.com or visit any of the shops at Wolflin Square. Okay, I'm back with Jeff Whelchel. Jeff, this is part of the show I call 8 Straight. 8 Straight is sponsored every week by Panhandle Plains Historical Museum and Canyon. It's the largest history museum in Texas, and its collection includes 266 buttons, including buttons made of bone, glass, rubber, and iron that were recovered at the trading post site of the Second Battle of Adobe Walls in 1874. And the museum's newest exhibit, Remembering Adobe Walls, just opened last week because it's the 150th anniversary of that battle, which was very influential. So you can go see that exhibit the rest of the year. Learn more at panhandleplains.org. Okay, when you think of Amarillo 10 years from now, what do you hope for?
Well, speaking as somebody that lives out towards the Bushland area, I would love to have a completed loop. That right now is it's nice having the accessory roads open.
It's made a lot of progress, and it feels
but
pretty nice on that side.
But I think everybody in town has discovered that now, and so it's not the quick road that it used to be. But the other thing that I thought of that this community lacks is my sister lives in the Houston area in what's called a Del Webb community.
Yeah.
And it's an over 55 community. It's not really a retirement community because a lot of people are still working, but it's just tons of social activities. Some of them have golf clubs, or golf courses, various activities. And I wish Amarillo had something like that.
Maybe a little bit smaller homes.
Right.
For empty
townhouses
nesters
or somebody that's ready to simplify their life a little bit, but stay social.
Okay.
And I wish we had something similar to that. Or everybody's heard of the villages in Florida.
Right.
Something along that realm would be nice for this community.
Okay, other than wind, what does this area have too much of?
Well, my first thought was sarcastically that feedlot smell that we get periodically. But my main thing is...
And that's driven by the wind at some point.
Yes, it is. I would say my biggest frustration is our traffic issue. I think this city has outgrown itself in some ways. Just anybody that's gotten off of I-40 going south on Western, some days it's next to impossible to get into that turn lane. And so just some things like that, I wish that we could get it a little more attuned to handling a larger number of people as we're growing.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of growing pain that a lot of cities go through. And it's very frustrating in a place like Amarillo where we haven't had to deal with traffic issues. Right. Dallas people would look at this and say, what are you complaining about? This is great.
Or I go to Austin, or the whole I-35 corridor. Yeah, but I tell you what, I see patients or clients from the surrounding towns, and they come in and they really complain about our traffic.
Yeah, we've been spoiled for a long time,
We really have.
What does this area not have enough of?
One thing is some specialist physicians. We're lacking like neurologists terribly and some things like that. That was the first thing that came to my mind. I wish we could figure out something with the Civic Center because we haven't had, big name concerts in a long time. And I miss that. I wish we had an HEB.
Yeah. All of those are quality of life.
I've heard rumors. Yeah, they're all quality of life. But
I have heard the part about the specialist physicians that in some regards, like they're experts at Texas Tech, Health Sciences Center that I had no idea were there. But then there are other places that we just don't have the expertise here.
We just don't. And unfortunately, our medical population of doctors is starting to age, and several of those doctors have retired, and those spots have not been filled.
And part of the reason is because maybe we don't have an HEB or we don't have the concerts. We need those amenities.
We've got to have something to draw younger people in, no doubt about it.
What's your favorite local neighborhood?
Well, I live in the Eagle Tree out towards Bushland. I'd have to say that. I'm a country boy at heart, so that's the perfect compromise to me is I have 8 acres.
All right.
And there'll never be a house that's within 8 acres of me unless I sell some land. And so that's what I would say. I love Eagle Tree.
Okay. What's your favorite local restaurant or food truck?
Have to say HUD's.
Yeah.
If you've had their cherry limeades or their breakfast burritos, now one of them is just down the street from my financial office, and so it's probably a bad temptation, but I love it.
I drive past it most mornings on the way home from the gym, and there's always a line out into the street.
Always.
And some people are getting breakfast burritos, and some people are getting cherry limes at 8 in the morning. So
absolutely love it.
What's the most underrated aspect of living in Amarillo?
Oh, hands down, I think the people. You can be in line somewhere and strike up a conversation with almost anybody. I recently had a nurse practitioner that works out of Tennessee that came to my medical office to shadow me for an afternoon, and she was blown away at how friendly all of my patients were. She said, these people are amazing. No, I didn't tell her that I've weeded out some of the sour apples, but still, for the most part, I think people around here are really good people.
What's your favorite local nonprofit?
My daughter worked for about 12 years with Christian Relief Fund that supplies food, clothing, education to children across the world, primarily Kenya or Central America or India. And so I'm a big fan of them. And their cost per more of the dollar that you give goes directly to the kids. Then they don't have a high administrative cost, which I really appreciate.
Okay. And when was the last time you visited the Big Texan?
It's probably been 5 years or so. Now, I go by Cadillac Ranch every day on my way home. And but no, the last time we came was when we had a family member from out of town that wanted to see the famous steak place.
Were they properly impressed by it?
They were. They couldn't believe that someone could actually eat such a large piece of meat.
Well, and that's why the fact that some people do that, that's why we need doctors and functional medicine.
Well, exactly. And I need to go because I've been told they do a great birthday thing for you.
Free prime rib on your birthday. Okay, well, that concludes the 8 straight questions, Jeff. I like to close by asking my guests to endorse something. So what's one thing you would like listeners to know about or to experience?
Over the last year, my daughter and her husband have fostered a little girl.
Okay.
And that's opened my eyes to a world that I haven't seen before. And we have a foster care crisis in the Panhandle.
Yes.
There are not enough families that are willing to foster kids. And I've been very impressed. There's an organization called Amarillo Angels that provide emotional support, food, different items to foster families, and they have been invaluable to my daughter and her family. I've been very impressed with them. They go through a World for Children, which is a foster care organization, and I've been very impressed with them. But there's kids out there that if we want them to have a chance in life, we need to give them some sort of stability.
Yeah, the statistics about the foster care system are just very discouraging.
It's terrifying.
Yeah. Gwen Hicks of Amarillo Angels is a past guest on this podcast,
Okay.
so there's a lot of good information from her. I appreciate that endorsement. Jeff, thanks for being on the podcast.
I enjoyed it. I sure appreciate it.
And that concludes the episode. I want to say thanks to Jeff for the interview. You can learn more about his financial advisor practice at financialprogress.com and his hormone management practice at healthyhormones.us. His book, The New Thyroid Handbook, is available on Amazon. Thanks also to Shemen Dental, the shops at Wolflin Square, and Panhandle Plains Historical Museum for supporting this podcast. And as always, thanks to Angelina Marie for editing the show. I really am grateful that you listened to this, especially if you listen all the way through the credits and get to this part. That means that you're invested, and I love it. Hey Amarillo exists on a weekly basis because of listeners like you and the local people who support it financially through patreon.com/Hey Amarillo. Hey Amarillo's executive producers include Patrick Burns, Katie Linger, Jason Burr, Josh Wood, Corey Burns, Wes Reeves, Barbara and Jim Witten, and Cindy Graham. This has been episode 360. My name is Jason Boyett, and I'll see you next week.